What is the best training split? Now, as many of you may or may not know, there are a lot of different training splits. You have push-pull legs, you have upper-lower, full body routines, bro splits and so forth. But with so many variables, is there actually a best training split? Now, in order to clear some of the heat around the many splits, I've decided to give some perspective on what you have to look for or maybe set up for yourself in order to create the best training split for you. Now, to start off the debate surrounding all the different kinds of training splits, I'd like to go over the muscle protein synthesis process. Now, the process that starts working after training any given muscle is called the muscle protein synthesis process. Now, protein synthesis is spiked by resistance training by itself and protein intake, meaning that it becomes active by working out and again by eating protein. Now, when we train, we break down muscle tissue, which stimulates amino acids from the protein that we eat through muscle protein synthesis to repair the damage. So to put this simple, its primary function is to repair muscle damage and build new muscle tissue. This process generally lasts for about 48 to 72 hours on average, as a general guideline. So that means that in theory, you can train your chest on Monday and train it again on Wednesday to keep the muscle protein synthesis process continuously running, which would result in more muscle mass growth. But if you were to fully take advantage of muscle protein synthesis, you'd have to train full body every other day with sufficient volume for every muscle group in order to quote-unquote maximize your results, which would definitely cause you to become under-recovered. In order to set up the best training split, there has to be frequent muscle stimulus and sufficient volume to stimulate muscular hypertrophy. Now, with those two combined, there's also another variable that needs to be applied, which is progressive overload, which basically drives progress in the first place. Now, progressive overload can be achieved in a few ways. You can increase the weight, which is one of the most common methods. You can increase the amount of reps, you can increase the amount of sets, and you can decrease the rest time between your sets. So basically, you can change load, volume, or rest time. A meta-analysis study done by Dr. Brad Schoenfeld determined that training muscle groups twice per week is superior for hypertrophic results than training muscle groups once per week, which further indicates that the muscle protein synthesis process could be playing a huge role in one's results in the gym. Now, even with a counter study in 2018 from Cahoon et al. Resulted that training full body 3 times per week versus training 6 times per week yielded no differences in 1RM squat, bench, deadlift and fat-free mass. But there was no difference in muscle protein synthesis stimulation, since the 3 times per week group trained full body, which resulted in an evenly spread protein synthesis stimulation compared to the 6 times per week group, from which the split wasn't given, but quite logically would have an equal distribution of muscle stimulation across the 6 days, since it has been given that the volume had been equally spread out throughout the week to ensure adequate recovery between your sessions. Now, this concludes, in my opinion, that the stimulation of muscle protein synthesis is still more important than simply training more days per week, which isn't optimal if you'd look at, for example, a bro split. So this will come down to, for example, comparing a upper-lower split with a full body split. The protein synthesis stimulation is still frequent. Alright, so besides the variables that contribute to theoretical muscle gain, there are also a few variables that are definitely of importance to everyone personally. Do you enjoy the training split? Does it fit in your time schedule? And are you recovering well enough? Now, those are definitely some things that you have to ask yourself as well in order to be able to stick to a certain training split in the first place. Alright, so now that we know which variables we need to take with us when creating a solid training split, let's cover how to set it all up. Now, as mentioned in the beginning of this video, there are a ton of different training splits. Upper-lower, push-pull legs, full body, bro splits and so forth. Now, let's cover the upper-lower split first. So an upper-lower split obviously consists of days where you train the entire upper body musculature in one day, often excluding the abs, and days where you train the entire lower body musculature, often including the abs on that day. Now, since there are multiple muscle groups to train, there should be a conscious effort to lower the total volume per workout, since it's more efficient to spread that out over the multiple workouts per week. So instead of having all the necessary volume for adequate hypertrophic stimulation in one workout, you'd spread it out in, for example, 2 upper-lower workouts or 3 upper-lower workouts, depending on how you want to set up your routine. Now, if I were to follow a upper-lower split, which I have done for a long time and currently have mixed in with my current split, a upper body workout would consist of typically 2 to 3 chest exercises, 2 back exercises, 2 to 3 shoulder exercises, 2 bicep and 2 tricep exercises. And instead of having 4 sets on all exercises, I'd more than likely keep it at 3 to 4 sets to ensure that I'm able to recover well enough to hit the next workout optimally as well. Now, since you're training your entire upper body in one day and lower body on one day, it's obvious that you can even up the frequency to 6 days per week. So if you were to follow that route, plan your volume out accordingly to your recovery. Now, there is a set guideline for how much weekly volume you should be doing. It's given that it's around a range of 60 to 120 total reps per bigger muscle group and 30 to 60 total reps per smaller muscle group per week. Now, keep in mind, this is just an indication, and in my opinion, doing a bit more won't do you any harm if you can recover well enough from it. Since if I look at my own volume for chest, for example, I'm doing 26 reps on bench, 30 reps on incline dumbbell press and 45 reps on flies 2 times per week, so that's around 202 total reps per week. And I'm fully able to recover from that easily and still make adequate progress, so keep it as a baseline and not a set in stone number. Upper-lower splits have also shown to be extremely effective for strength gains, since especially for compound movements, frequency is often related to mastery. And by frequent stimulation of protein synthesis, this would make a solid split to follow. The next split I'd like to cover is the push-pull leg split. Now, this type of split is set up very logically. Now, you have a day where you perform all of the movements that require you to push weight, so chest, shoulders and triceps. A day where you're required to pull, so back and biceps and often rear delts. And a day where you, as the name calls it, train legs. Now, even with training 6 days per week, it allows for a muscular stimulation of 2 times per week. So logically speaking, there's more volume per workout compared to the upper-lower split. A little bit less ability to train every muscle group as frequently, so to counter that, the volume must go up. So for example, since the frequency is at 2 times per week maximum, you could easily have multiple exercises in the 4 set range to bump up the volume to an adequate enough level. Now, since you have days where you train a few select type of muscles, you're more able to quote-unquote specialize on that muscle group and put more focus on, for example, your chest, since you don't have to still train back and biceps afterwards. The next split I'd like to cover is the full body split. Now, as the name recalls, this split requires you to train your entire body in one training, multiple times per week. This split is, as I see it, extremely effective in especially beginner lifters. Now, since these splits primarily focus around the compound movements, it's a split that can serve really well to build a solid base for your physique. Now, I'm not saying it's just for beginners, since I do know a lot of experienced lifters that also follow a full body split. Since this split calls for every muscle group to be trained, it's easily said that the volume per muscle group is quite low. Regardless though, you are to select the most effective exercises which give you the most bang for your buck. Now, often enough these splits are focused, like I said, around the compound movements, and quite often all of them in one training, with specialization on one different compound spread throughout the training days. So for example, it could look something like this. Day 1 you have the bench as a primary compound, squat, deadlift, overhead press and other accessory exercises, and the remaining days would revolve around one primary compound movement as the primary focus for that training day. The volume per exercise and per muscle group is quite lower than on all of the other splits I've just covered. And since the full body splits require you to train every muscle group, that's quite logical. If you were to follow a full body split and utilize the same volume as with the push-pull leg split, you'd have to take a deload every 3 weeks, since it's just not doable in terms of recovery and even the training itself, since you'll be in the gym for 4 hours plus straight. So the volume is quite low, but frequency and overall muscular stimulation is quite high and extremely beneficial for people who don't want to be in the gym 5 to 6 days per week. And lastly, I'd like to go over the infamous bro split. Now, this particular split gets a lot of hate as of the past couple of years, especially since the research around frequent training throughout the week is getting more and more acknowledged and supported. The typical bro split would focus around 1 or 2 muscle groups per workout with a frequency of 1 time per week. The typical chest and tricep, back and biceps, legs and shoulder workouts. Now, since the volume is very high per session to reach that threshold of adequate volume, you could potentially say that it should yield the same results if total volume recommendations are reached on that one day. That could be true, but still, the muscle protein synthesis process doesn't lie. If a muscle is frequently stimulated, it will be sensitized to amino acids or protein intake more frequently and thus have more potential for hypertrophic buildup. Alright, so now that I've covered the most well-known splits out there, I'd like to fall back on a few other variables that you need to take into consideration as well. Now, you can definitely train the most optimal way possible for the maximum amount of results, but what if you don't enjoy that? What if you really enjoy the bro split? Would that just mean that you're wasting your time in the gym? No, absolutely not. It's always the rule of thumb that doing anything is better than doing nothing at all. So if you find yourself getting really bored by doing push-pull legs or upper-lower, for example, then please, by all means, follow a bro split. Now, even if you know that there are more optimal ways to train, it's always better to train with enjoyment than to train with monotony and tediousness. So how often should you change your training split? Now, this really depends. I am a big believer in if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you find yourself really enjoying one type of split, then stick to it. However, there is some truth and logic to training your split up from, for example, a upper-lower split where you focus a lot on frequent training to a push-pull leg split where you focus a lot on volume. Now, if you tend to notice a stall in progress, it could help to change up your training split to give your muscles a different stimulus by either increasing or decreasing frequency or increasing or decreasing volume. However you put it, progress and enjoyment are king and queen for your results. Now, of course, all ways lead to Rome. But that being said, there are definitely more optimal ways and less optimal ways to get there. And me personally, I'd rather pick the most optimal way, which I still enjoy, for the best possible results. Alright, to sum everything up, pick a training split that will give you good results, one which you enjoy, and one you know you can stick to for a good amount of time to make epic progress in the gym. Alright, thank you all so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video and thought it was informative, then please consider hitting the like button because it really helps out to support the channel and help the channel grow. Leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel for so much more content coming really soon. I'm out, guys, and peace out. See you in the next one.